All right. Hey, Brad. All right. Colleen. It seems like my internet is giving me trouble today, but we're going to power through here. Okay. All right. So quick, gonna kick this off. If you have any issues, let me know in the chat or just DM me on Twitter. Really excited to kick this off. All right. All right, welcome to a live stream number 14. I'm going to be talking about how to track your time in Airtable. This is actually really exciting. This is a personal workflow I've been using for quite a while, so really excited to share it with the broader community. So our goal for today is going to be being able both to track projects and tasks in Airtable, but more granularly, what I've been doing is tracking down to the 30-minute interval in Airtable. So what I mean by that is splitting my day into 30-minute intervals and mapping those to tasks or projects to really get a bird's eye view of where I spend my time. So whether, whoa, what is that? That's weird, just my downloads folder. Really being able to, really being able to track my time in 30-minute intervals to be able to track that back to projects and tasks. So, our goal for today is going to be creating a dashboard of everything that we're spending time on, whether that's in meetings or mapping to different tasks. So first, we're just going to set up our tasks and our project table, very summary. And then the most important thing, what I'm most excited about, is this time tracking piece, being able to map that to different projects and tasks. Cool. Okay. And then we're going to build a dashboard that really gives us where we're spending our time. And if we have some time at the end, would love to talk about invoicing and how do you set up an invoice in Airtable. Cool. Okay. So the first kind of steps are quite simple. I'm just going to create a projects table. So let's say this is going to be project 1, 2, let's say I have, let's say, digital marketing campaign, some simple stuff. And let's say I have, blog post series, and let's do 4. So next is podcast episodes 1, 2, 3, 4. And then finally it's going to be, let's say, homepage redesign. There we go. Let's create a few tasks for each one of these. So let me delete the existing fields. Status feels like someone we can keep. So let's keep, backlog. In progress, done. There you go. Save that. Start assigning these backlog in progress. So the first couple of steps, if you are unfamiliar with Airtable, this might be new to you. If you are familiar with Airtable, this is going to be a revision of a lot of the fields in Airtable. So we're going to tie these back to tasks, and really it's at the task level that we're going to be able to track our time. So we're going to create a linked record. So essentially mapping projects to tasks. Let's create a task table. There we go. So now we have this kind of basic task table. And let's start mapping projects to tasks. So digital marketing campaign, let's say we first have to scope audience. What I'm doing is I'm searching for scope audience. It doesn't find it, obviously. I'm creating it. So let's create maybe 2, 3 tasks here. Digital marketing campaign. We then need to create content. And then finally, let's, email new content. There we go. That sounds about reasonable. If you have some ideas around what we should create as tasks, I should always kind of forget to think about examples, which is probably the hardest thing to do on stream. Blog post series. So, let's add a new record. Let's talk about what is Airtable. And then let's just do 2. So second is going to be very conveniently how to track time in Airtable. Okay. All right. Let's continue here. Let's do 2. There we go. Okay. So podcast episodes. Let's just call these episode 1. Let's make this go a little faster. Episode 1. Episode 2. That's okay for now. And then scope design. That's the only task we're going to create for that one. Okay, so now we have our projects and our task. Very simple. I want to keep this very simple. I think the interesting part in this is, that the blocks and the time tracking. You're really able to segment and be granular in where you spend your time. That said, we still need to kind of, add some statuses here, really create our task table a little more granularly. So I'm going to start creating some single selects here, very simple stuff. So let's say, again, another status. It's going to be backlog doing blocked done. And I'm going to kind of pull from the projects table the project status. That way it's going to be a lookup field. So we're pulling that information from the project table. That way we're not putting things in to do that are in the backlog. So, assuming that the project is in backlog, your tasks should be in in backlog as well. So let's put this one into doing, and this one's put into backlog, and then these ones into done. Let's give ourselves one more project in progress. Let's put this one, the digital marketing campaign, in progress as well. That way we have a little more things we can work with like that. Okay. So now we have kind of our projects, our tasks. I do want to kind of add one more, and this is just for the dashboard to show some things off. So maybe we'll put importance. There's going to be another single select. So let's say very important, not important, and then urgency. Right. Okay. So we got a single select here. Another one. It's going to be urgent, not urgent. Simple stuff. Let's save that. And, let's just start assigning some things. So I'm just kind of randomly going here, and this will, like that. We've got 3 here, so let's copy paste 3. And another mix here. So you can, thing you can do here is make this a little darker, make this a nice little, it's pleasing to the eye. And same thing for importance, right? You want to make sure that important is that like dark, like that. Maybe not red. Give it a nice little dark blue like that. There we go. Not urgent. Let's give a few urgent ones. Not urgent. Okay, so now we have kind of our basic structure, right? And thinking about this, you can create a Kanban view here. So let's call this all tasks. Let's create a little Kanban view. And it's going to be tasks Kanban. And we're going to organize it by status. So now we kind of get a sense of what we should be working on. Let's add some importance, urgency, like that, right? So we have our project it's related to, it's important, it's urgency. And, my goal here is really to get a sense of how much time am I spending every day on each one of these tasks, and then rolling that up to the task level, and then potentially rolling it up to the project level to get a sense of, how much time have I spent generally on all tasks for this project. And then you can kind of start thinking around things of, can you bill based on that time that you spend, can you start getting a sense of that dashboard? So Colleen Eisenhower, matrix is exactly where we're going. So that's a good catch there. It's not personally something I use, but when I was building out this use case, it's something that came to mind. So we'll be doing that near the end. Okay, and then so really, what I'm most excited about. So coming back to our dashboard here, so we have talked about where we're going. We've set up tasks. We've set up projects. And, one thing about Airtable is that it's okay if projects, evolves over time. So maybe we add different fields or we add different fields to tasks. That's totally fine, right? Keeping it very simple. And so what I want is, being able to say how much time that I spend on this specific task. Right? And how I think of my day is I come into work, let's say at 9 a.m. and I finish at 6 p.m. or whenever I finish. I want to be able to map those specific time slots to a specific task. And the reason is that, I like being able to say I spent 4 hours on this, I spent 8 hours on this. And I like being able to kind of map those not only to the work I'm doing, but what type of work. Is it a meeting? Is it deep work? And things like that. So we're going to start creating a time tracking, kind of table that we're going to tie back to tasks. So how I've thought of this, and, really up to you to think of this however you'd like, is I've split my day into increments. So let's call this, and I got to get the names right because I do have a script coming in a little later. I call this time block. All right. So time block, it's going to be a number field. So let's say I have a 8-hour day. That's 16 time blocks. So for every day, I'm gonna have number of hours that I work times 2 time blocks. So 1, 2, 3. Let's do a manual example. So 4, and I'm just gonna 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13, 14, 15, 16. So this is my 16 half-hour time blocks, right? And so what I want is I want this table to kind of reflect my calendar. I want this to be, say 9 a.m. to 9:30. This next record is 9:30 to 10, then so on and so forth until I end my day. And I can start mapping those chunks of time, those chunks of work to specific tasks. Right. So let me know if this makes sense. And I'm just kind of alt-tabbing here so I can get the chat as well. So apologies for that. There we go. There we go. Okay. So I can close this. Apologies. Okay. So now that we've kind of created these different chunks, let's start getting that time start and that time end. So what I'd like to do is kind of think of, okay, if I start at 9 a.m., this chunk should be 9 a.m. to 9:30. So let's actually just add a today field, a date field. So it's going to be a date field. So this is going to be, adding those time blocks to my day. So I'm always going to put this at kind of midnight, right? So let's say I'm doing today's, so I'm just going to put today. And I'm always going to put midnight, and you'll see why in a little bit. So let me just paste that down. So essentially, reminder, what I want this first record to be is, 9 a.m. to 9:30. So essentially, we're going to just kind of add a formula that says, what time did you start? So we're going to have a time start, or at what time did I start working that day? And we're going to just trying to find what I called that. In my other base. Start time. So let's say I started at 9 a.m. We're going to add 9. So I'm just going to say today I started at 9 a.m. and we're kind of building the pieces. Now, this is not necessary. This is just because I used to do this manually. And so I wanted an easy way to do this where I would just do the time blocks. So now we're going to actually create a time start, which is going to be a formula field. And what we're essentially saying is let's take date add. So we're taking the date and we are adding from the start time, adding that time block, right? Start time plus time block, right? So we're essentially saying take the date, add 9, and then add, that time block, which in half an hour, right? Does that make sense? And we're going to divide this time block by 2. Right, so we want that in to be in half an hours, and the unit we are going to be doing is hours. So this should make sense once we add it. Let's see what that gives us. We should have GMT time here. That should update. Okay, so it gives us 9:30. So let's take off half an hour here. Minus 0.5. Okay, this is starting to make sense. So my time start, this is telling me this record, this first record, is 9 a.m. That's the time start. So I then want to create a time end. Formula field again. Let's actually just copy paste this right here and just keep that half hour out of there. Now again, there's much better ways to do this, I'm sure. What I wanted was a way to do this on the run every morning. Let's save that. And we're going to call this time end. So now I've kind of broken my day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. into these oh, can you not see my screen? Oh, whoa. Oh, I'm so sorry. Man, this is really bugging me today. It's not... Apologies for that. Okay. Hopefully it's fixed now. Man, okay, I'll have to re-record this just for everyone's sake after, but I appreciate your patience with this live stream. So I just want to, I don't know what you saw there, what you didn't, but I want to walk back into what we're doing here. So essentially, we're breaking this day, my day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. into half-hour chunks. So essentially, I have, chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3 until 16. That's my normal 8-hour day. Okay, good. Apologies for that. And then I'm specifying a start time because that's one of the variables. And then I'm essentially creating these chunks. So this is telling me 9 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. And this will become important when I'm kind of like mapping my day to specific things. So when I come back into here, I'm like, okay, I work from 9 a.m. to 9:30 on this specific task. So now that we've broken this up into these little days, let's actually link this back to our tasks. So we're going to call this, what task did we work on for that specific half hour? Tasks, save, there we go. So let's say, I wake up at 9 a.m. and I'm saying, okay, the first thing I want to work on is this, create content. And I'm going to work on that until 12. Right? So if I go into that task, now I have those kind of 2, 4, 6 chunks of half hour. So I can start thinking about, okay, can I roll up the amount of time I've worked on that specific task? And that's relatively easy. I can just say, okay, go back to all tasks. And now I have these linked records. And there's a reason they're unnamed. We'll get to that in a moment. We can start thinking of, okay, we can have, number time worked. And there, so chunks, let's call this chunks, and this is going to be a count. So this is the number of chunks associated to each task. We're counting those chunks. Let's save that. Now we have those 6 chunks, and this is time spent. It's going to be a formula and just says, take the chunks, divide by 2, and this is, hours spent. There we go. So let's save that. So this is telling me I've worked 3 hours on this specific task, right? And so you can start mapping your different tasks, your days to different tasks and projects that you're doing. Now, another thing I do is I kind of map both that chunk, both to the task that I'm doing, but also sometimes to the type of work. So let's just call this type. And then I can have a single select. And let's say I usually like work, meeting, admin. That sounds about right. Right? So just kind of differentiating what meetings you're in. And even when it comes to, like, sometimes what I like to do is when it's a meeting, is it an internal meeting? Is it an external meeting? Is it a company meeting? And what that allows me to do is kind of have a granular sense of where I'm spending my time. So let's say I spent that first morning in a meeting, and then I spent the rest of that. And, also important, let's add, a lunch break as well. I like to add that as well. So sometimes you want to eat lunch. And I even have other sometimes when I don't want to tell folks what I'm working on. So lunch. And let's do another task for this afternoon. Scope audience. Let's say I did that until 4 p.m. And this was another mix of work and then different meetings. And let's say then I was just in a meeting. I don't need to specify what that work was. It's just a general meeting. So now, we're kind of getting to a pretty interesting place where we can start kind of counting the time we spend on different projects and tasks, the hours we've spent. Now, you'll agree with me that it's quite tedious to do this every day. So before I go into like automating, let's just create a key here. And what I like to do is maybe we just do the date and the type. Right. Date and type. There we go. Let's put a little space there. You can kind of specify that first key however you want. On my end, let's do datetime format. Let's give it a nice little format just so our key kind of makes sense here. And let's just give it day. That's just telling us what we worked on when, like that. So it's telling, this is meeting, work, and you can specify this. I actually have this in days and hours in my key. But there we go. Okay, so we've split our day into 30-minute chunks, and we've mapped that to tasks, and now we can calculate the amount of hours we've spent. Now, I've been doing this workflow for about, a month, and every morning I'd come in and I'd have to kind of add the date, kind of add the time blocks, add the start time, and then that would create the rest of my table. As you can imagine, that is quite annoying. So I actually wrote a little script that on Mondays I run, and it runs it for the rest of the week. It creates this little slot for that. So let's actually go ahead and for the rest of the week, go ahead and do that and run that script. So I'll just walk through the script. I won't go too much into it, but I just pray that it works correctly. Okay, so let me go into here. I'm calling it shortcut, which was what I called it because I would spend about 10 minutes every morning. So the script is very poorly written, and I apologize for that. It essentially asks you, what time do you expect to start this week? And it creates all records for that week, and how many hours do you expect to work every day? Little typo there. And then essentially what it does is that for the rest of that week, from 0 to 5, it creates these records kind of going into the the table, adding the date, adding the start time, and then incrementing this little time block. So it's relatively simple script. So let's run it and see if it works correctly. I just want to make sure I've got it rightly configured. Okay. Okay, so it's going to run today until we are Wednesday. So it's going to replicate Wednesday if all goes well. I'm kind of wondering, there's going to be an error. What time? Let's say I work 9 hours a day. Next. Okay, so it's running, seems to be running correctly. If I come here, it's not running exactly correctly, but you can get an idea of what it's doing here. So I'm going to stop that script actually. It's running for 4 a.m. for some reason. But let's just take this. Oh, it reran on today. I see what it did. Okay. Let me actually delete that. This is the risk of going live. And let's move this to 12 a.m. So it had some issues with the time zone, but it seemed to work correctly otherwise. So I'll fix that after. But this gives you a sense. So it creates all of those records. I'm going to do one more day here. This is how I used to do it manually. And I start work at 9 a.m. every day. There you go. So I've split. I now have 3 days in this. And again, let's just kind of map this to different things that we're working on. And what you'll notice is that this updates. Yeah, the time zone thing, I think, is just because my settings are on GMT right now. And I usually run it on a different machine. So apologies for that. The risk of going live. Today is a specifically difficult day to go live for some reason. So let's say I worked on that until 12 and I went to lunch. And then let's say I was in a meeting the whole afternoon. That make it easy till 5. And then started working on different things. Let's say, let's keep it in the meeting here. And then this whole day is dedicated to this blog post series. Let's say work like that. So I'm just kind of splitting my day. It seems tedious when you're doing it, but I actually do this throughout the day. And so it doesn't seem so much work. And, you know, the value, once we get to the dashboard, I think will be quite clear. Meeting, 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 work. Let's give it another little task here. Scope audience. Let's say I did that until 6 p.m. Okay, so now, you know, I've been mapping all of the work that I'm doing. What's great is that I then have this calculation right here around the hours I've spent. Let's give this, you know, one more decimal so I can see those 0.5. So it's telling me I've spent 7 hours on scope audience. I've spent 3 hours on create content. I've spent 5.5 hours on what is Airtable. So now that we've kind of split our day into these little chunks, so we can actually map the time we spend to each one of these tasks. So if you have a team, you can actually, you know, have each one of these rows assigned to a team member so that they can map as well, and then all roll that up and get a sense of how much each team member has spent. You know, at a large scale, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend tracking everyone's time at the 30-minute increment. It's just something I like to do, but that not everybody necessarily wants to do on your team. Okay, so now that we have this, we can kind of start working, you know, around creating our dashboard to get a sense of how much we're spending in different tasks week by week. So what I like to do is kind of map every single day that I work to a week. So let's say I want a specific week. Let's actually start working on the dashboard, and then we'll get a sense of what we want to do. So let's call this time tracking, time management maybe. And first, let's just do a, not a Gantt chart, just a chart. So this is just telling me, the number of half hours I've spent this week in different types of work. This actually is a good chart. Let's start there. Let's make this into a pie chart. So it's telling me I've spent 48% of my time working, 40% in meetings, 11.5% at lunch. I try to keep that lunch number as high as possible, making sure that I spend as much time eating as possible. It's a joke. Let's add that, and let's call this time tracking. So type of work. Now, another thing you can do is kind of get a sense of how much time have you spent on different tasks or different projects. So let's go into a chart. And our x-axis, instead of being that type of work, is going to be the task, right? So this is telling me I've spent 14 chunks, 14 half hours, but instead of having chunks, let's actually just have a field that is hour. So this is telling us that, if we want to roll up on the hours spent, and we're just going to call this 0.5. So every chunk is 0.5. Save that. And instead, if we want hours spent, let's actually summarize. Y-axis is going to be a field. We're going to take hour, and we're going to sum that. So this is telling us we've spent 7 hours on scope audience. We spent 5.5 hours on what is Airtable, and we spent 3 hours on create content. Now, specifically, what I really kind of love about this is you can get really, really granular. So you can get, what did I work on this week? What did I work on this month? What did I work on this year? So, so far we only have 3 days, so it won't really make sense in this work case. But if you go into week num, so it's just telling what number, let's just say week number. And then we want a formula field that is week num of today. Or actually, no, let's just take the week num of the date. Right, let's save that. And this is all going to be the same week number. But as you start building out this dashboard, you can have your different week numbers. You can have looking at this week versus last week. So I actually have 3 dashboards, one for today, one for this week, and one for this quarter based on week number. So just if you ever want to do that on your end, what you can say is it this week? And you're just kind of doing week now. So formula, this is just going to check is, that record that we're looking at part of today's, is this chunk in this week? That's probably better. So what we want is we want week num of today. So that should give us back 32 because, and then you essentially say if week num today is equal to week number, then this chunk is in this week, otherwise not this week. So this is all this week, obviously. And so you can start creating views that say, let's create a grid that is this week. And we're going to filter where contains, or is, I should say, this week. Now, this is not going to filter anything out, but then you can start building your dashboards around this week. So looking at, how much time did you spend in meetings this week? That's the primary goal of my dashboard, is always to track the amount of time I spend in a meeting every week. And I try to minimize that, maximize lunch, minimize meetings is the goal. But truly, and just getting a sense of when I am working, what am I working on? So for instance, let's say I can create a grid view that is work related. So only work. So when I am not in a meeting, so show me where type is work, right? And then from that, looking at a chart, looking at the work, let's do a pie chart, and let's do task. So this is tell me as a percentage of the work that I did this week, what was I working on? Kind of start thinking of this month, this year, really up to you, what you want to build once you start tracking your time. You can also do hourly increments, really up to you, essentially, to build this however you want. Okay, so coming back to our showcase here, happy to take any questions so far. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but haven't really answered a lot of questions. So we've created our time dashboard, and I want to talk a little bit as a last step here in terms of invoicing. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm just gonna grab a glass of water. All right. I'm going to assume everything is crystal clear, or that there's a large lag. So apologies for the stream issues today. I'm actually going to probably record this separately due to the stream issues, but it won't be as complete as what I'm showing you here. Cool. Okay. So we have this time, hours spent on each task, right? So let's say I'm actually going to hide some stuff here. Chunks, time tracking, urgency. Actually, before we get into that, I did want to just quickly for you, Colleen, because you mentioned the Eisenhower method. Let's install a matrix block that organizes our task table according to urgency and importance, right? Let's do this. There we go. So now we have all of our tasks. Let's actually create a in progress or doing. So in progress, let's call it in progress. So everything that is not complete, where status is not done. There we go. And now we can create our little Eisenhower based on in progress. There you go. And what's great about this, you can actually update. So let's say how to track time in Airtable goes from let's move something. Let's say what is Airtable goes from not important and urgent to urgent and very important. You can then update it. There you go. So now we have that in our dashboard. And what's great is that these dashboards let you kind of take data across tables, right? So this is all information coming from my task table, and our matrix from my tracking table, and this is from my task table. Cool. Okay. Last point here, invoicing. Appreciate your patience if that's what you came here to watch. So we have this hours spent. Let's say for this project, let's actually just roll up for each project total time spent. So we're going to roll up, go to the task table. We're going to take hours spent. We're going to, we don't want any formulas. Let's say sum the values. So this is going to get us all of the time spent in hours on each project. And let's start invoicing, right? So let's say we have a rate number. Let's say, I don't know. Let's call it a currency. Let's give it a currency. Let's save that. Let's say we're charging $300 an hour. We're very expensive consultants. This one's $150. We give this person a discount. This is $200. This is $175. So billable is rate times time spent. Rate time total time spent. Let's save that. Right. Let's make this a currency field. Okay, so this tells us how much we can bill for this specific project. So let's have a billing. Now, one way, just simply, I'm just going to start by kind of showing you where we're going. So we're going to use a page designer, which lets you take information from a page and put it into, take information from a record and put it into a page. Okay, so essentially going to the projects table, and so this is the project name, and we can put any information. So what's important is that billable, that's the total amount that we're owed. Now, I am frankly absolutely terrible at building these things. So this is total. Most people are much better than I am. So total billable, like that. This is the project name. So let's add a little text here. Project. Right. Okay. You kind of get the point here. We can put some backgrounds, whatever we want. If we put some text here, and you can kind of style this however you'd like. So like that. Let's give it a little background. Filled. I don't know. You can give it a little bit color like that, and start building out your billable. And what's great is that this will kind of take information from all of your records and put it onto this invoice. So total billable 3,000, and then total billable 825, which is information from here, right? But you need to know who you want to send it to. So then you can start building out your CRM and associating projects to clients. So let's say I have a client. Let's say Colleen is my first client, and my second one is Brad. And that there's information about Colleen. There's an email, there's, an address and things like that. So let's say email. This is Colleen@gmail.com and Brad@gmail.com. It's a very small consultancy that I'm running here, and their address. So, 101 P.O. Box. And this is 102 P.O. Box. Now, a bunch of information you can start putting here. So I'm going to associate those different projects to the client, right? So we're going to create link to another record. Going to link to clients. Save that. Now we have Colleen, who's my first client here, and then Brad, my second one. So now if we go back into our billable, we can actually start adding information from the client, right? So I can kind of inline like that, start adding information from, from Brad or from Colleen, the related client. Let's go to the little table, and I can start adding the add column. I can add the address, and I can style this however I want. So let's say put this at the bottom, I should be really better at making page designer things like that. So now we have the project, blog post, who we're sending it to, that total billable, and really have that ability to style this however we want. You can even have a status, kind of in progress or done. You can even put the tasks, so what you worked on, and kind of start adding information. So hours spent, how much did you spend on all of those, their status, and really whatever you're tracking in Airtable can kind of end up on your bill, and write these custom invoices based on the structure of your table. Okay, so I think with that, caveat being, you should be better at page designer than I am. So let's go back. Was there anything else I wanted to show you? So invoicing, that's done. Cool. Okay. Just recapping what we did here, essentially, just a little bit quickly. We started with nothing. We have our projects where we are associating those two different tasks. We've created these tasks. We can look at them in different views, Kanban, looking at information. But really, what's my favorite part of this is kind of looking at time tracking your time. And really, once you set this up, all you need to do is associate what task you're working on to what chunk of time, what type it is, or any other information that you care about. You can create views such as this week. I also have today. I didn't do that, but you can do that as well, just by matching, the date here with today's date. And then we associate that time to a specific task that lets us create these time management dashboards, right? Around, what type of work are we doing? Where are we spending our time? When we are working, what is that task that takes the most amount of time? This matrix block that lets us prioritize or rearrange based on two single selects. And then we talked quickly about invoicing, pulling in this information into an invoice. And Brad asked a great question. Can you push the line item detail to 0 or QuickBooks for invoicing? Yes. I think I haven't worked with either of those. But what I'm thinking about, sorry about that, is the best way to do that would actually be through using the button. So the Airtable button. So let's say projects, send to QuickBooks in the button field, then send to QuickBooks. And essentially you would create a URL that takes this information and sends, let me just put some blank here for now. That sends this as a webhook to Zapier to send to QuickBook or Xero for invoicing. Probably Stripe has, I think, direct integrations with Zapier. So you can definitely send a webhook to Zapier, who will send it to QuickBooks. Oh, hey, Connor. Jumping in at the end there. And so that's one way of doing it. Another note here is that Airtable just launched automations. So here in those kind of Zapier-like, this is a beta for Proto users. So eventually, maybe, I don't know, that may end up there. So you can send directly invoices to Xero or QuickBooks. So Connor, I'm not going to recap everything for you, but it's good to see you. All right. Any other questions before we sign off on today? Note that I'm probably not going to upload. Designing an invoice is. I mean, once you do it once, it's much done. It's done, right? So but yeah, I can't design for my life. So cool. Yeah, appreciate that, Connor. I'll probably I'll send you the private link. I'll probably re-record this because I felt like there were some errors here. Cool. So really appreciate you all joining me today for this live stream. Appreciate you taking the time. You can subscribe to the channel, be updated on any new live streams. And with that, really appreciate all of you joining. Have a great day. Best way to reach me is on Twitter at Aronkor, ARONKOR. Bye, everyone. Cheers.